It is a highly controlled operation coordinated by land forces. Tornado missions in support of troops on the ground are seeing crews take out individual Iraqi tanks rather than blasting entire areas. So concerned is the Air Force about the need for precision that the orders are that if a target can't be engaged, the crews are to bring the bombs home. But there was nothing to bring back when this bomber returned from Basra. Crews continue to face hostile fire, anti-aircraft artillery and some surface-to-air missiles. The undeniable truth is that Iraqi forces are still fighting back.
There's clearly a battle going on down there. The picture's relatively confused from the air because there are oil fires still. Clearly some areas where there's a battle going on or has recently been going on.
We managed to pick out military equipment, and we've put in 2 laser-guided bombs into each of the target areas, and also we've kept the heads down as well with a bit of strafe in the target area as well.
The push into Baghdad brings the war into its decisive phase, and Tornadoes will continue efforts to dismantle Republican Guard positions in the coming days. Karen Allen, BBC News at Ali Al Saleh.
This is the tip of the dagger that points to the heart of the Iraqi regime. US tanks roll ever closer to Baghdad. Along the road they pass the burning wreckage of Iraqi armour. The Republican Guard here either destroyed or withdrawn.
Coalition forces at this point are outside of the Baghdad airport and are positioning themselves to engage that fight at a time of our choice.
That puts the capital itself within easy striking distance, though when that strike might come, the Pentagon isn't saying.
We are expecting, or at least planning for, a very difficult fight ahead. We are not expecting to drive into Baghdad suddenly and seize it.
To the south, Iraqi forces came under sustained bombardment overnight. So by daybreak, the US infantry could be on the move again, but at a cost. As many as 7 soldiers were killed when a Black Hawk helicopter was downed by small arms fire. 4 more servicemen on board were injured and rescued. Close to Basra, where British troops continue to encircle the city. Today putting out oil fires started by forces loyal to Saddam.
We're getting extremely good human intelligence, Iraqi people telling us where the Ba'ath Party are meeting, and within a space of 2 to 3 hours, that meeting place does no longer exist.
In Baghdad, Ba'ath Party activists are armed and apparently ready for the kind of bloody street fighting the Americans want to avoid. But US special forces are also operating here. Last night, entering a presidential palace, they returned empty-handed. Nor has there been a sighting of Saddam on TV. Instead, it was his information minister relaying a message in praise of Iraqi troops. And despite a fierce aerial assault, those troops are said to be heading south of Baghdad to meet the American advance. The coalition says the noose is tightening, and tightening to choking point. John Ray, ITV News.
The helicopter fired rockets followed by machine gun fire, and as suddenly as it had come, that threat went away. Such attacks have left nobody above suspicion. A simple farming family found itself the subject of Marines' attention because their home was near the new base camp. As the dilapidated farmhouse was searched for weapons or signs of support for Saddam Hussein, an old lady sat praying inside, humanitarian rations handed out by the Marines unopened at her feet.
I think it was good enough to have as many people that we did, just for precaution. We didn't have all our personnel here, so it was just doing what we can to keep ourselves safe.
It was, though, just a farming family, wasn't it?
It turned out to be, yes.
Later, the farmers' visitors were also stopped and searched. The fear is of links to the militia or Iraqi intelligence, but particularly of suicide bombers. The Marines' attitude has changed dramatically. Far from being hailed as liberators, they now feel hunted, as if every civilian poses a potential threat. Gaining hearts and minds is seen as secondary now to survival. As these men prepare for the final push, they're still trying to work out precisely who the enemy is. David Willis, BBC News, Central Iraq.
The RAF will know this as their Tornado Day. It's been a day of consolidation for them. They've been looking after the US forces, providing them with air support around Baghdad, and also those clutches of British forces around Basra. Let's just take a closer look now at one of these GR4 Tornadoes. Underneath the wing there, you see that large, looks like a bomb. It's not actually a bomb, it's an added fuel tank. It's so they can jettison it if needs be, if the pilot or the co-pilot decide that they need added maneuverability. That isn't a missile above it, that's the launch mechanism for a Sidewinder. And if Carl, our cameraman, pans to the right, you'll see there's one going off right now. Sorry about that, they've been doing that every 20 minutes or so, and there's just no point carrying on because it's just too noisy. The thing on the far right-hand end of the wing there is ECM. That basically sends out a jamming signal. Of course, the sharp end is what the pilots do when they go on these 4, 5, 6-hour sorties. The more ordinary end of the market, perhaps, is the armourers, the people who work with the bombs, the people who work with the electronics. One of those people is Jo Jennings, and she joins us now. What's it like working these kind of shifts on these kind of planes?
It's really good, actually. It's just it's good to see your work at the end of the day when the bombs are dropped.
Are there any particular problems when it comes to the conditions you have to work in? It's been exceptionally hot. There's a heat wave on the way as well, and the dust, the sand gets everywhere.
It does get everywhere. It gets in all the plugs and everything. You try and load the bombs, try and get them to work, and if it doesn't work, you can't do anything about it, really. You can sit there for hours waiting for them to work.
When you say you can sit there for hours, oh, hang on. That's another one away on another sortie. When you talk about having to sit there, Jo, for hours, is that the technology, is it the high-tech element of it that doesn't quite mesh with what's slung underneath?
Yeah, it's the GPS, basically, and the bombs. So the bomb can talk to the jet, basically. You need to know if it's talking to it. You can get 3 Gs up on your weapons control panel, and that's basically what you're waiting for.
And is that what the pilot in the cockpit has to have as well?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Before he goes, he has to have the 3 Gs.
Do you find the shift system very, very tiring? Because you're working 12 hours on, 12 hours off. It sounds pretty unrelentless. It sounds pretty relentless.
It is tiring, but at the end of the day, we're here to do a job, so we're doing it.
Jo Jennings, thanks very much. Jo Jennings, armourer personnel there. Well, from a very noisy RAF base, 50 kilometres away from Iraq. Nick, back to you.
Militia have set fire to an oil pipe to confuse Allied pilots who've been bombing their positions. Today, the net began to close in on them as British tanks and Warrior armoured vehicles moved in across the bridge. They took what had been a militia stronghold, a local college. We're now inside the compound that the Iraqi resistance was using only yesterday to fire upon British positions on the outskirts of Basra. The militia has now fled, and British soldiers are clearing out the mines and the booby traps they left behind. Inside, Saddam's portrait may still be standing, but his control of this city is being eroded inch by inch, day by day.
We have the factory complex this side, and we have troops on the southern side here as well. But as I say, we can now start to bring pressure to bear, and at the same time, of course, try and make sure that we link up with humanitarian sources in order that we can bring, rations and relief in behind us.
On the main road into Basra, ordinary Iraqis are losing their initial fear of the British forces, most waving and smiling as they pass. Nearby, a burst water pipe gives an impromptu shower, the mood relaxed, almost hopeful, as if people sense the fighting here could soon be over. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Basra.
Back from another strike mission. For the past fortnight, these Tornado GR4s have been pounding Iraqi targets, taking out air defences and now clearing the way as ground troops advance northwards.
Every artillery piece or tank that we can take out from the air is one less piece that the army on the ground have got to take out, and more importantly perhaps one less piece that's going to be shooting directly at them.
It is a highly controlled operation coordinated by land forces. Tornado missions in support of troops on the ground are seeing crews take out individual Iraqi tanks rather than blasting entire areas. So concerned is the Air Force about the need for precision that the orders are that if a target can't be engaged, the crews are to bring the bombs home. But there was nothing to bring back when this bomber returned from Basra. Crews continue to face hostile fire, anti-aircraft artillery and some surface-to-air missiles. The undeniable truth is that Iraqi forces are still fighting back.
There's clearly a battle going on down there. The picture's relatively confused from the air because there are oil fires still. Clearly some areas where there's a battle going on or has recently been going on.
We managed to pick out military equipment, and we've put in 2 laser-guided bombs into each of the target areas, and also we've kept the heads down as well with a bit of strafe in the target area as well.
The push into Baghdad brings the war into its decisive phase, and Tornadoes will continue efforts to dismantle Republican Guard positions in the coming days. Karen Allen, BBC News at Ali Al Saleh.
Scouring thousands of square miles of Iraqi desert, RAF Puma helicopters packed with troops carry out Eagle patrols, swooping from the skies to stop and search civilian vehicles. The Gurkha troops hit the ground running as soon as a suspect car is spotted. Part of a fresh operation to flush out Iraqi fighters who've been dressing as civilians to carry out their attacks. 4 Iraqis in the car are frisked for weapons. In the vehicle's glove compartment, a large amount of money is discovered. The British believe Iraqi civilians are now being paid to cause trouble behind the main front line. The finds radioed back to base.
We've been told to bring anyone in with lots of money on them. Shut up!
The Iraqis are taken away, flown to a nearby British camp where they'll be questioned by intelligence officers.
This is a massive area for the troops to try to police, but controlling every movement is absolutely impossible.
Even Iraqi motorways are covered by the flying checkpoints. The supply routes are prime targets. Iraqis are being urged to disrupt the movement of fuel, food and ammunition to the front line.
They're being told to come down into this area, and the money is a bribe or as payment to put an attack in on us.
And the thick black smoke close by is a reminder of just how important this work is. An Iraqi attack could strike anywhere, at any time. Jonathan Charles, BBC News.
Iraqi forces as well.
That's right, Jim. Now, here, to try and set the big picture, officials say they are beginning to see information that perhaps elements of maybe 4 regular Iraqi army divisions are near the airport, Saddam International Airport, south of Baghdad. They believe these elements, and they can't really say how many troops are involved, are part of the final defense along the southern edge of the city. They believe that over the last several days, they have punched through that outer ring of Republican Guard defenses. They're now getting closer, and they don't even know if they're going to get to another ring of defenses once they get through this area. Now, of course, Special Republican Guard and security services do remain dispersed within the city. But because of what they're beginning to see on the battlefield today, they're beginning to wonder if they're approaching that tipping point where perhaps the regime is beginning to get to the point where it may tip over. They don't know, but there's a couple of indicators that officials tell us they are seeing out in the field. One is that the Republican Guard divisions are now completely mixed up around the battlefield. They see forces moving in a variety of places. The Republican Guard divisions no longer discrete units. Again, around the airport and several other places, they see the regular Iraqi Army units mixing in with the Republican Guard. Part of the last effort of defense, they say. That's not a normal procedure. But there's 2 other indicators that are causing them a great deal of concern, officials say. They say that there is recent information that confirms to them that the potential use of chemical weapons remains very high. Officials have publicly said this is something they worry about as U.S. troops get closer to Baghdad and the regime there may get more desperate. They also say there is intelligence information that Saddam Hussein's regime may, as U.S. forces get ever so closer, begin to attack civilians in the city, launching attacks and blaming the U.S. for civilian casualties. And finally, to the north of the city, to the north of Baghdad, U.S. forces are now conducting somewhat covert reconnaissance of the road between Tikrit and Baghdad, keeping watch, they say, for any leadership elements trying to flee the capital.
For the Americans advancing on Baghdad, it's been a ground-shaking sort of a day. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and 3rd Infantry Division are now close to the airport and the southern outskirts of the city. Whether they go in from here is a political decision. They are not configured for defense.
I have no doubt we're an offensive organization. Keep us moving, keep us moving.
The American assault has been backed by Apache helicopters firing Hellfire missiles. It's a war of high-tech against low-tech. but the Iraqis have resisted. Iraqi television has shown pictures of their artillery trying to halt the American advance. This battalion of the 3rd Infantry came under attack on the way north. The soldiers took up counter-ambush positions. American casualties are light, Iraqi casualties not known. American losses include a main battle tank disabled by a rocket-propelled grenade and 3 soldiers killed when an artillery unit came under so-called friendly fire. The suspicion is that it was mistaken for an Iraqi position and hit by precision-guided bombs. Unusually, the Americans have released footage of their special forces capturing the Haditha Dam northwest of Baghdad. No sign here of any resistance. Overnight, the Americans attacked one of the presidential palaces outside the capital, a favorite place for Saddam and his sons. The special forces blew open the door, but to their disappointment, there was no one at it.
Say that those reports you've seen that the Americans are close to Saddam International Airport are a pack of lies, and to prove their case, they took reporters there. Coalition troops may be close to Baghdad's main airport, Saddam International, but they're not there yet. The airport concourse is deserted, and this afternoon there was nothing to indicate that a battle was underway nearby. The Iraqis took journalists here to prove that they're still fully in control. At a news conference, the information minister told us that claims the coalition forces were at the gates of Baghdad were lies and fabrications.
They are not even 100 miles or whatever. They are not in any place. They are on the move everywhere. They are a snake moving in the desert. They hold no place in Iraq.
In the centre of Baghdad today, the atmosphere has been somewhat surreal. Life goes on almost as normal. In recent days, shops have been reopening. It's even possible to eat at some of Baghdad's restaurants during the daylight hours. Most Iraqis only have access to government-controlled newspapers and state-run TV and radio. Few have shortwave radios. Few are aware of how close coalition forces may now be. The bombardment continues day and night. This city is used to attack from the air. Few people yet know, though, that the attack on the ground may be about to start.
As dawn breaks, the British take their first tentative steps into the outskirts of Basra. From a rooftop, they monitor the progress of tanks heading into the suburbs. This is uncharted territory, a provocative move intended to test Iraqi reaction. Their arrival at a key road junction brings the answer. Rockets launched from a house in the city are tracked down and the building demolished. This is what the British Army calls dipping its toe into Basra. It's the farthest forward that the tanks have been. If their presence doesn't cause too much of a ripple, they'll be persuaded to take greater strides into the heart of the city. A roadblock set up on the main route into Basra. Groups of men thought to have links to the military are marched away. Even if they aren't directly involved, they may have vital information. The British fear that the Fadaim militia could be hidden anywhere amongst this warren of homes. Although they're being slowly worn down, they're not yet defeated.
The attacks, though, are becoming increasingly desperate, and in fact last night I can tell you that they mortared one of our positions in the south of the city, resulting in a pregnant woman being injured, and we then managed to evacuate her by our own helicopters to a hospital.
As part of their fight to stamp out the paramilitaries, the army are trying to put out some of the oil fires they use as a smokescreen. But armed with only 2 fire engines, it's one battle they're still far from winning. Juliet Bremner, near Basra.
Count the June.
The Iraqi people deserve to live in peace under leaders they have chosen. They deserve a government that respects the rights of every citizen and ethnic group. They deserve a country that is united, that's independent, and that is released from years of sanctions and sorrow. Our coalition has one goal for the future of Iraq: to return that great country to its own people.
Because in the front, we are killing them, we are hitting them, we are making them tired. They are dirty invaders, colonialists, and we need to finish them up. They are becoming hysterical. The more we kill in the fight, the more they bomb residential areas. They are racist, they are Nazis, they are fascists. They are more dirty than the Nazis and the fascists because they are using modern technology that was not owned, possessed by the Nazis or the fascists. They are bombing residential areas as a cheap way that would suit these invaders.
The battle is edging ever closer to Baghdad. Heavy artillery pounding Republican Guard forces that lie just south of the capital. Beside the highway, the burnt-out wrecks of 2 Iraqi tanks, a third still in flames. At Musayyab, US forces battled with Republican Guard units to seize a key bridge over the Euphrates. The Americans believe they were fighting a force of about 2,000 Saddam Hussein loyalists and members of Republican Guard units. Some vehicles around the city were still burning. Also, there was evidence of the destruction of motorcycle units that carry anti-tank weapons. The Americans believe the Iraqis did attempt to detonate the bridge, but they failed.
Right side or the south side of the bridge had been detonated prior to our arrival. Our engineers that went across by boat identified that, and that's why we pushed on the left side or the north side of the bridge.
As the Americans advance, they treat Iraqi prisoners of war by the roadside.
As we move closer to Baghdad, the number of prisoners being picked up is growing, but they're still relatively few in number. And it does raise the question as to what has happened to those members of the Republican Guard units that are said to have been defeated.
While American forces arrive at the outskirts of the capital, the search for Saddam Hussein himself goes on. These are pictures taken by the Americans of their special forces searching Saddam's Farfar palace. It was apparently frequently used by the Iraqi leader and his 2 sons, but no one was found there. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, south of Baghdad.
First, the Marine top brass in their fleet of helicopters, and then the president himself. 2 weeks into the war, and George Bush seems to be unruffled by the rows about strategy and the anguish about losses that have dominated the media and the capital. But this place is a million miles from Washington, and for this audience, the commander-in-chief is a hero who knows how to parade America's military might.
Having traveled hundreds of miles, we will now go the last 200 yards. The course is set. We're on the advance. Our destination is Baghdad, and we will accept nothing less than complete and final victory.
But, you know, I've been trained for the last 3 years. I'm a junior pilot on the squadron. My training has made sure that I'm focused and I know exactly, you know, what to do if I'm called to do it.
Since then, he has been called upon, and many times. 20 combat missions all over Iraq. He's been part of attacks on the front line, and for the first time, dropped bombs on enemy troops.
It does sort of give you a sense of purpose once you've actually, you know, prosecuted an attack that's helped the guys on the ground that are fighting. I mean, they're having a tough old time as it is.
But when you're back here, do you think about that?
You know, you sometimes ponder whether or not, you know, anyone was hurt or killed by what you've done. We certainly get a great measures to make sure that, you know, everything we drop on hasn't got anything to do with any civilians at all.
Like all the Harrier pilots here, there's now not much more than sleeping and flying. And at 26, it is still hard to move from expectation to experience.
You know, the feeling of the unexpected, but also, you know, the adrenaline that you're actually doing what you've been trained to do. And, you know, it's a constant struggle between the two.
Have you changed as a pilot and maybe as a person after what you've been through?
Well, I don't know if I've changed as a person. I'll have to wait until I get back, you know, see what my family and my friends think. Probably, I would say. Yeah, it's definitely made me sort of reflect on things a lot deeper than perhaps I have done in the past.
A lot has changed in a few short days, and there are many like Scott getting used to the risk and to the pressure of war. Richard Bilton, BBC News, Kuwait.